Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. Today I'm going to show you how you can make your very own multi-boot macOS install hard drive. You guys saw me using this in a recent video, and just to clarify exactly what it is, it's an external hard drive with the install images for macOS 10.6 to 10.10 preloaded on it. So when you go to boot options on a Mac, it will allow you to select which version of macOS you want to install. This is really useful for someone like myself who works on Macs on a daily basis, because I can plug a single drive into any Mac and boot whichever version of macOS is appropriate. It saves me from having to carry around a folder of disks or a whole keychain full of pen drives. So I'm going to show you a little bit of prep work to get ready, and then I'll show you how you can actually set one of these up yourself. Okay, right, now to get started you're going to need your external hard drive connected and disk utility. As you can see, I've got a 320GB Seagate free agent drive here that I'm going to use as my boot-in drive. And in addition to that, we'll also need a disk image for each version of macOS that we want to put on it. Now, I've collected my disk images over the past years. However, the more recent ones like Yosemite and the Mavericks installers, you can probably still find these on the App Store and download them directly from Apple. The older ones, you may have to go hunting to find those. I can't help you out with that one, I'm afraid. So that's our images. Now, the first thing we want to do is partition our drive. So we're going to be putting on, for the sake of speed, I'm only going to do 7, 8, 9 and 10. I'm going to skip 6 because it's a big image and it takes for a while. So we're doing 4 versions of macOS, and I'm going to add an apps partition on the end to put things like my Office installer on. So we're going to go 5 partitions, and under options we need to make sure that it's set to GUID partition table. This ensures that the Mac can actually boot from the drive. If it's on master boot record, which most external hard drives will be, you won't be able to boot from it. So we click OK, and I'm going to set each of my partitions to 10 gigs in size, because that's the maximum amount of space that these disk images will require. So we do all that, and on this drive that leaves me 280 gigabytes for my apps partition. In reality, the drive that I use day to day is an 80 gigabyte hard drive, so obviously the apps partition is much smaller and it doesn't need to be this big, but whatever, just use what you've got available. Your apps partition, you want to set that to macOS extended journaled. The rest of them you can just leave as whatever you want for the time being, because they're going to get reformatted anyway. So let's apply that. Partition. Okay, right, so that's our partitioning done. Now the next thing we need to do is drag in the images that we're going to use. Now the 10.7 and 10.8 images, I have these as DMG files. ISOs and CDRs are also acceptable. I'm going to drag these into disk utility just like that. Now the 9 and 10 installers, because these are installers not images, we use these in a slightly different way, so we'll come to these later. So let's switch back to disk utility. Now we are going to open the 10.7 image. I'm just going to skip the verification there. I know this image is working, and we need to select the volume within the image, and we're going to restore that to Untitled 1. So I'm going to drag and drop Untitled 1 to the destination. It is critical that you work with the volumes inside your disks. Don't drag the disk itself, work with the volume within it. This is just a container. That's the actual data that we want. So there's our restore, all set up, ready to go. Go. And yes, we know we're going to erase the destination, that's fine. And I'm just bashing my admin password, and we're off. Okay, so there's our first image completed. Now what we're going to do, we're going to eject the source image just to tidy up, and we're going to open the 10.8 image. Now I'll just close that. Whoop. And once again we're going to select the volume, and we're going to restore that volume to the Untitled 2 volume. Restore, erase, password. Okay, right, that is our 10.8 disk done. So we can eject that once again. Okay, now to create the 10.9 install image, we're going to use a utility that's included in the installer called createinstallmedia. Now that involves typing in this bastardly long terminal command. So go into terminal and you want to go in sudo, and the breakdown is it's the path to your install image with a few extras on the end, and then we specify the volume we're installing to. So Untitled 3 should be your destination volume. And then once again, we specify where the installer is, and we've thrown on no interaction on the end just so it cracks on with it. So type in that, it will ask for your password, and then as you can see, that's now cracking on with creating that install media. Take note that this section is a silent install, so don't worry, it's quite normal just to be presented with this blank terminal prompt that's just saying copying installer files to disk. That's normal. It will probably take it at least 10 minutes or so to copy the files. So just be patient, and you should see that your external hard drive activity light is sitting there flashing away. Okay, so there is our completed copy. So now we're going to rinse and repeat, but for 10.10 instead. So I'm literally just going to mouse up and just modify this, changing 10.9 to 10.10 Yosemite. And we're going to change Untitled 3 to Untitled 4. And we're going to go 10 Yosemite. And there we go, that's ready to go. And off we go again. Just refresh the password. Okay, and there we have it. That's our 10.10 one done. So let's exit out of terminal. And if we go back to disk utility, as you can now see, we've got 10.7, 10.8, 10.9, and 10.10. Now, sadly, we're not able to rename these images. We can change the name in disk utility if we want. However, when you actually boot from the drive, it will just come up with these bog standard volume names anyway. There's not much you can do about that. However, when you boot from it, they will appear in the correct order, a la 7, 8, 9, and 10, from left to right. So you will still be able to easily see which one you want to boot. Another thing you may notice is that although we reserve 10 gigabytes for each one, each image has only used, well, in this case 3.8 gigabytes or less, or slightly more in some cases. I have tried to shrink these images, I've tried to shrink the partition sizes before to fit more onto a smaller disk, but in my experience things just seem to go wrong. Despite what it says it uses, it still just seems to require more space than that. So my advice is to reserve that 10 gigabytes. Even though I nailed in 10 gigabytes for each partition, it hasn't actually given me that because of losses and disk cylinder boundaries and complicated stuff like that. So TLDR, make sure you allocate 10 gigabytes because then it'll just work. So yeah, there it is. Right, let's give this thing a reboot just so we can see what it now looks like. So we're going to hold down Option. And now, as you can see, we have macOS 7, 8, 9, and 10 that we can boot from. Thankfully, the newer ones, you actually get Mavericks and Yosemite names on them. So it's getting easier to understand what you've actually got from this. Now, one last question remains, which I'm sure you're all dying to know, is what about El Capitan 10.11? The answer to that is El Capitan hasn't been released quite yet, and I haven't been looking at the developer build for this because of reasons. However, I'm 99% certain that El Capitan will be distributed and work in exactly the same way as Mavericks and Yosemite. So you should end up with an installer image that you download from the App Store, and you can once again run the createinstallmedia utility to add that to your bootable drive. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.